Hey guys, this is Steven with Module 6 assignment for ACTE 630, which is talking about differentiating for all students. And we were tasked using the Online Accessibility Handbook, the UDL principles, and the textbook. We are to evaluate two of our materials to see how their accessibility meets the needs of different students. For those of you that don't know me or haven't seen any of my posts so far, I am a chemistry teacher at Redline High School, and I took two of my CP chemistry class, which is kind of the mid-level chemistry class. And I took my comp chem class, which is kind of the lower tier. But going through this, I didn't really see a good way to kind of go through things, so I made my own kind of rubric, so to speak, using the handbook. For each of the components, I kind of assigned either a check plus, a check, or a check minus to kind of see how I felt my document was accessible to those with different needs. So kind of walk through each one here, talk about each component, and kind of give my rating. But quick overview, going through things, I think this is a lot more that meets the eye. I kind of pride myself on creating my own PowerPoints, pulling material, and really putting thought and effort into the animations and all kinds of things. But after going through some of these components and realizing I'm missing quite a big chunk for someone that has some accessibility differences, it's a little bit awakening that I need to kind of change how I'm going about things if this is something I'm to do in the future. Kind of using a PowerPoint, I'm actually going to use the PowerPoint I used for my Zoom a couple weeks ago, and I talked about empirical molecular formulas. And the first component talked about the outline view. This is kind of the first thing that made me realize, like, oh man, maybe I don't have everything that I do need. Because surface value, I thought everything looked, fairly good. The animations were great, fonts were all good, the headings all nice. But when I looked at the first component, which was the outline view, they said all the text from the slides appear in the outline view. I know all of my slides have text, but I noticed here from 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, it contains some of the examples that I walk through, and I'm not exactly sure why none of this does show up in the view, but to someone that isn't able to read or has the reading an ability to read it and having to use this view, it appears that it has nothing. So I gave myself a check minus for missing just a big chunk there, and even 15, 16 here I think is kind of the same thing. So that was kind of a little bit startling. My slide layout, I think that looked pretty good. It all kind of looks, it gels well. The same headers, same text font, such and such. When I look at the reading order, oh, that's using the tab button to cycle through different things. I noticed that 8 out of the 24 of the pictures or the text boxes that I had failed, which was kind of startling. It was quite interesting to kind of go through and see that as you're hitting tab and cycling through the different text boxes, seeing the cursor kind of jump around from top left corner of the page down to the right, and I think a part of that is kind of how I create these PowerPoints. I kind of what I call Frankenstein things, where I'm pulling multiple PowerPoints up from online, saying, "Oh, I like this bit. I could use this problem," and kind of copy and paste it and kind of make it look all pretty, but I'm starting to see there's a little bit underneath that's causing those orders and those imported animations and such to kind of cause the reading order to be out of sync. So 8 out of 24, that's a 33%. So I said that was a fail. In terms of the images, clip art, and shapes, I also gave myself a check minus. Out of the 9 pictures I think I had in my presentation here, none of them had any of the alternate text. I know that's something that's still relatively new that doesn't, at least for me before getting to Redline, not really something that was made known to have done. So it was upsetting to see that nothing that I had anything imported, and obviously with myself not adding anything, to have 0 of 9 with any alternate text. I gave myself a check minus for there. In terms of lists, I gave myself a check plus. I know most of these, the bulleted lists and the numbered lists, they seem to, when tabbing through, they go in the correct order, and all of equal value. They're all the same size, the same font. So I was happy with that aspect of it. In terms of links and tables, with this particular presentation, I didn't really have anything in regards to those, unfortunately. In regards to color, I did have sufficient color contrast with kind of the gray, light gray background and dark text. And I don't really use color to convey meaning alone. I have a couple bits of color in my presentation here in terms of the graphics and here empirical formula with the red, but by no means am I using that to convey anything alone. The big thing here for me too, in terms of math and science, it was interesting to see that math cannot be written accessibly in PowerPoint. Wasn't quite sure how that is supposed to work, if I'm being quite honest. I know in a couple of these slides here, I'm walking through different steps that show up, with the click of an animation, and it was interesting to see that and not really be given any direction, rather, on how to show, math and science. How's that supposed to be portrayed in a PowerPoint? So that was another eye opener for me. And then in regards to audio and video, I put a check minus for that. I didn't really have anything that would require that, so I guess that's kind of not applicable for this. So overall, it's a decent, I would say, kind of middle of the line, but definitely could use some work. For the second component, I chose to use a worksheet, a document. Hold on one moment here. Okay, here's the correct document. So I used this worksheet I go through with my Comp Chem students. We're getting into chemical reactions now. We kind of went through identifying different reaction types, and now we're getting into the hated part of having to balance the different chemical reactions here. Real quick though, kind of a quick afterthought with that PowerPoint presentation. I know in the textbook there on page 218, they did talk about differentiating instruction for struggling students. So with the inability to be able to convey math and science expressions through the PowerPoint slides, two suggestions that the book did make said that you could post advanced copies of course material and record sessions. And I actually kind of do this a little bit right now with my kids with Google Classroom. I always prefer that they listen to what I'm saying as opposed to fast and furiously writing down everything that I do post, because a lot of it is not, they haven't developed the skills yet to pick what's necessary and write those things down. So I always provide those notes for them and have them listen as they can follow along. But the other one too is recording sessions. There are some components of the curriculum that require you to problem solve. So I wanted to record myself solving problems, showing how to set it up, and walking through it step by step so that they could have that to reference, when they're not in the classroom, and applying it to online instruction, as an asynchronous ability for students to be able to use that. But getting back to this document here, let me pull up my notes here for the word. Again, with the check plus, check minus system, my tables and color all checked out. My column headers looked very good. The reading order in terms of kind of, tabbing through things here kind of followed a good order as well. I had the black and the gray as a contrast, and I included color here for this one because some students are able to visually see it better when they can track the movement of, it'd be an ion for the chemical equation, but if they just have it represented by a letter, they can move things around and then translate that letter to whatever it is it's representing in that chemical equation there. So gave myself checks for tables and colors. Didn't really have too many forms for this Word document. My headings and images, again, this is kind of a simple, just a worksheet that I had created. I didn't have any headings or images put in here. My list, though, it does follows a list. Excuse me, I can't find my words here. Format a list as a list using numbering or bullet list. I'm pretty good with following the list and the bulleting features that they have. For this, also didn't have didn't have any links. That's kind of not applicable. And again, with the math and science, check minus. It says to use a math type or a plugin to write equations. I simply just use the subscript features of Google Docs and Word to kind of make my equations appear. I think these uh, question marks here are supposed to be arrows, so this is another transferring frustration between um, a document into Google Docs. But it says use math plugin from dessci.com for Word, and to not use Microsoft's equation editor, which is quite literally what I do. So between the Word document and the PowerPoint of the math and science aspect of not using equation editors and not being able to use PowerPoints to um, to write them to not be written accessibly, PowerPoint was interesting and requires some workarounds, obviously. To reference the UDL a little bit, um, the first component was to provide multiple means of engagement. In the access part there, it says minimize threats and distractions. I think that's something I can improve, and it just requires a little bit more attention or cognizance, rather, of what your documents and worksheets might look like. It said to minimize threats and distractions by varying the level of graphs, schedules, timers, and such to kind of prevent that sensory overstimulation. So I know for some students here, this chart might be a little bit much. So to maybe break things down into smaller components, or make it a bigger box with just one component or one text box talking about synthesis, and the next page talking about decomposition, so where they can kind of compartmentalize their thoughts a little bit without having to see everything at once, is something I can improve better. They also talk about in the access portion there to optimize individual choice and autonomy. I think providing equations like this, instead of giving a math assignment of 1 through 8, just tell them, pick 4, ones that they look like are something that they can do, and choose to do those, I think would be welcomed by students. For the second part, provide multiple means of representation to clarify vocabulary and symbols. This is kind of something I do, I think is important, especially with the lower levels, to make sure we're constantly being reminded of what things mean. It's hard to say what exactly the cause would be in terms of short memory or just not being able to focus or whatnot, but I kind of find having things like this for them to constantly reference as they're working through the different problems here is a good tool for them to have. And with the last component of the UDL, the action expression, I was kind of going through that, and I said I need improvement kind of all around. This really isn't too much that I do, and I think I know that as an educator. So kind of going through the different between access, build, and internalize there, it's looking through each component. That's something I need to improve on. Hindsight now, kind of looking at my evaluation of what I have. There are a couple things in the textbook too they talked about, like accommodations and tools for receptive and expressive challenges. Short of just presenting this material, especially with science, is like a hands-on activity, especially one that involves labs, and how do we express that? So a couple things that caught my eye were the fact that they said that you can demonstrate hands-on activities in real time with a DocCam. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I want to use that to be able to record how to solve problems and be able to give that option to them, without having to be meeting in real time. And that you can use virtual labs for simulated hands-on experiences. That's on page 222. I'm sure most of you know what PhET is by the University of Colorado Boulder. It has a lot of really cool interactive simulations for science, math, earth science, physics, biology, a whole bunch of cool stuff there. And lastly, guided note sheets. This is something I kind of do now too as well. I always provide those on kind of bigger note days, or just kind of a break sometimes from them having to constantly take notes, and helps them focus better on what I'm focus better on what I'm saying, as opposed to you constantly just writing down what I'm saying without really comprehending or listening to what's coming out of my mouth. But hope you guys enjoy this presentation. This is definitely a very reflective piece for me to see how I would function or perform as an online educator, and definitely going to make me cognizant of creating material going forward to make sure that it does meet the needs of those who have special needs. So thanks for watching, and see you guys later.